Yesterday I suggested that the opening words of the Apostles' Creed, I believe, are not just about mental assent to a set of dogmas, but really point to the notion of trust. Today, we begin to explore who or what it is that we actually trust. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. I believe in God the Father Almighty. For many of us, saying the opening words of the Apostles' Creed bring great comfort. But others find the word Father to be a bit of a stumbling block, either because their relationships with their own fathers were problematic or even abusive, or it's because they believe it can lead to the false idea that God is male. All I can say is that while my own father was anything but perfect, it's not a stumbling block to me. I can understand those whose relationships with their fathers placed a permanent stain on the notion of fatherhood, and while I don't think of God as a male, it is certainly true that many people do, and this distorts not only their understanding of God, it has the terrible effect of elevating males over females in their understanding of what it means to be human. So I can understand those who find the word father problematic here. But acknowledging those two cautionary notes, the question is, what are we saying when we begin the Apostles' Creed with, I believe in God the Father Almighty? Turns out, we're saying a lot. And it has nothing to do whatever with elevating men over women or excusing abusive fathers. It has to do with relationship. It begins with the relationship between the earthly Jesus and the great God of heaven, whom he called Father. Not only his Father, but ours as well. Here's just a snippet of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, "Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven." He goes on to caution against conspicuous acts of piety, which are really intended more as public displays of piety than as true piety. He mentions almsgiving, praying, and fasting as examples of ways that people practice their faith in front of other people to get credit. At the end of each of these warnings, he repeats the idea of God as our Father. For example, when he talks about prayer, he says, "Whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you." Jesus also refers to God as his Father. Certainly the most poignant example of this is in his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. In the Gospel of Mark we read, "And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, 'Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want.'" All of this speaks to a kind of intimacy. Look, there are lots of ways to imagine God. Some imagine God as a kind of cosmic clockmaker or engineer who constructed the universe, set it on its merry way, but now sits back, a detached, unknowable figure with whom we have little or no relationship. The closest one can come to knowing God here is by observing the marvel of the created order. There is little emotion and even less relationship in this way of understanding God. Others imagine God as a stern and angry judge or potentate who watches our every move and is ready at any moment to strike us down for our misdeeds. The closest we come to God here is the feeling of a small child being caught doing something naughty and then receiving punishment. Fear and even loathing are the emotions this image evokes. Over against images like these, the Apostles' Creed points us to a God with whom we stand in meaningful relationship, one characterized by love, affection, and forgiveness. Human parenthood provides an incomplete but relatively helpful metaphor to indicate that the God whom we trust is also the God in whom we believe, and that the God we trust is neither a detached clockmaker nor an ill-tempered tyrant, but a God who invites us into a living and loving relationship. As with all good parents, this relationship does not condone everything we do. We all did and still do plenty of things our parents weren't pleased with, and our children and grandchildren also manage to do things we disapprove of. But we continue to love each other nevertheless. In the same way, God need not condone our every action in order to love and care for us. What does that love look like? What does that care look like? Well, that's what the rest of the Apostles' Creed helps us flesh out. For now, though, it's enough to know that this opening portion of the Creed points us to a God who cares and with whom we have a meaningful relationship. Tomorrow, not just any old God, but the Creator of all that exists. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.